High Admiral Vectora stood before the Zarkak's Imperial Council, her crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights of the war chamber. The holographic display behind her showed Earth, a seemingly insignificant blue planet that had recently caught the Empire's attention. Her voice resonated through the chamber, each word carefully chosen to convince the Council of her master plan. Distinguished members of the Council, our surveillance confirms that these humans have barely mastered basic spaceflight. Their greatest achievement is a primitive orbital station and a few lunar expeditions. They are perfect candidates for Project Genesis. The Council members shifted in their biomechanical thrones, their compound eyes reflecting the rotating image of Earth. Supreme Commander Ixthor, the oldest among them, leaned forward. "Explain your strategy, Admiral. Why waste our bioweapons on such an underdeveloped species?" Vectora's mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Because, Supreme Commander, Earth presents an ideal testing ground for our new creation. The Nexus strains are ready, and we need a practical demonstration before deploying them against the Arcturian Alliance." She gestured, and the hologram changed to display various terrifying creatures, products of centuries of Zarkak's biological engineering. Each was designed to be the perfect predator, adapted for different Earth environments. "Our genetics division has outdone themselves," Vectora continued. "The Nexus strains are virtually indestructible. They adapt, they evolve, and most importantly, they obey only Zarkak's neural signatures. Human weapons will be useless against them." Dr. Carell, head of the genetics division, stepped forward. His smaller frame contrasted sharply with the military leaders, but his reputation commanded equal respect. "We've incorporated failsafes at the quantum genetic level. No Earth technology could possibly decode, let alone manipulate, these sequences." The Council chamber erupted in discussions, crystalline appendages clicking against the metallic floors as members debated. Supreme Commander Ixthor raised a limb for silence. "Your confidence is admirable, Admiral, but remember the Procyon incident. We underestimated a species once before." Vectora's exoskeleton shifted colors slightly, showing her mild irritation. "The Procyons had help from the Arcturians. Earth is isolated. Our intelligence shows their nations still fight among themselves. They can barely agree on basic planetary governance." She activated another hologram, showing simulation models of the invasion. "The Nexus strains will be deployed simultaneously across all major biomes. Within days, Earth's ecosystems will be overwhelmed. Their military forces will be scattered, trying to fight enemies they can't possibly understand. Within weeks, their governments will collapse. Within months, they'll surrender." The Supreme Commander studied the simulations carefully. "And you're certain these creatures cannot be turned against us?" Dr. Carell stepped forward again. "The neural locks are absolute, Supreme Commander. It would take technological capability centuries beyond human development to even begin understanding the control mechanisms." What neither Vectora nor Carell could know was that their fatal flaw wasn't in their engineering, but in their fundamental assumptions about human nature. They had studied human technology, human weapons, and human political systems, but they had failed to study human history, countless stories of humanity turning apparent defeat into victory, of adapting and overcoming seemingly impossible odds. They hadn't considered that a species that had domesticated wolves into companions, that had turned wild grains into agriculture, that had reshaped entire ecosystems to suit their needs, might approach biological weapons differently than expected. The Council voted unanimously to approve Operation Genesis. As Vectora left the chamber, her exoskeleton glowing with pride, she was already planning the deployment schedule. In her mind, Earth's conquest was a foregone conclusion. 3 months later, she would stand before the same council, trying to explain how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. But for now, in the gleaming war chamber of the Zarkak's empire, victory seemed certain. The invasion pods were launched within a standard week. Millions of genetically engineered horrors, each carefully designed to target specific Earth environments, hurtled through space toward their unsuspecting prey. The Zarkax celebrated what they saw as the beginning of their expansion into a new frontier. They had no way of knowing they had just initiated their empire's greatest military disaster and humanity's most impressive triumph. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the genetic sequence displayed on her holographic screen, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. Around her, the hastily assembled International Biological Defense Center hummed with activity. Scientists from every major research institution on Earth have been brought together in this former particle physics facility, deep beneath the Swiss Alps. "This can't be right," she muttered, running the analysis again. "The complexity of these gene structures. They're like nothing we've ever seen." Dr. James O'Neill, her colleague from Oxford, leaned over her shoulder. "What are you seeing? These creatures aren't just engineered, James. They're quantum-coded. Look at these sequences. They're operating on principles we barely understand. It's like they wrote genetic code using quantum mechanics as a programming language." The specimen they were studying lay in a containment chamber behind them, one of the smaller variants that had emerged in the Pacific Northwest. The locals had dubbed them shadow leapers due to their ability to bend light around their bodies. This one had been captured not through military might, but through an unexpected quirk discovered by a wildlife biologist. Dr. Chen, a young researcher, burst into the lab, tablet in hand. "You need to see this. The Tokyo team just sent over their findings." Sarah grabbed the tablet, her eyes scanning the data. A smile slowly spread across her face. "James, look at this. The Japanese team found the same pattern we did in the neural pathways. These creatures aren't just weapons. They're tools. They were designed to be controlled." "But the alien signals don't work anymore," James pointed out. "We've been jamming them since week 2. "Yes, but look at the base structure of their control mechanisms. It's surprisingly similar to how we manipulate CRISPR systems. They're just doing it at a quantum level." Around the world, similar breakthroughs were happening. In Brazil, a team discovered that the aquatic variants responded to specific electromagnetic frequencies. In Kenya, researchers found that the aerial specimens had predictable behavioral patterns based on atmospheric conditions. Each discovery was shared instantly across the global scientific network, a level of international cooperation unprecedented in human history. The aliens had expected panic. They had expected chaos. Instead, they found humanity's greatest strength, our ability to adapt, learn, and work together when faced with extinction. In her private quarters that evening, Sarah reviewed the global progress reports. The Russians had successfully contained several specimens using adapted sonic technology. Indian scientists had mapped crucial portions of the creature's neural networks. Australian researchers had identified key proteins in their communication systems. Her tablet chimed with an incoming call from Dr. Yuki Tanaka in Tokyo. "Sarah, we did it. We managed to establish basic neural synchronization with a juvenile specimen. It's crude, but it proves the concept. We can communicate with them." Sarah's hands trembled as she processed the implications. "Send me everything. I'll wake up the team." Within hours, the facility was buzzing again. The breakthrough in Tokyo had provided the missing piece they needed. If they could communicate with these creatures, they could potentially control them. And if they could control them, "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Sarah announced to her team as they gathered in the main lab. "We're on the verge of turning their own weapons against them." In orbit, the Zarkax monitoring stations detected increased activity at research centers worldwide. They interpreted it as desperate attempts to find weaknesses in their perfect weapons. Their reports back to High Command were confident. The humans were struggling exactly as predicted. They didn't understand that every research center was sharing data, every laboratory was coordinating efforts, every scientist was building upon others' discoveries. They couldn't comprehend that humanity's greatest advances often came from exactly this kind of pressure. As Sarah looked at the Shadow Leaper in containment, she saw not a weapon of destruction, but a key to humanity's next evolutionary step. The aliens had given them something unprecedented, a window into quantum biology, and the tools to master it. They thought they were sending monsters to destroy us, she whispered to herself. Instead, they sent us the future. In the depths of the facility, the captured creature stirred, its neural patterns already beginning to synchronize with the human-designed quantum interface. The first step in humanity's counteroffensive was about to begin, and the Zarkax Empire had no idea what was coming. General Maya Rodriguez stood in the command center of the ALPS facility, watching dozens of holographic screens displaying live feeds from around the world. Each screen showed a different species of alien bioweapon, but something was different now. The creatures weren't attacking. They were waiting. "Dr. Chen," she called out, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Show me." Sarah Chen stepped forward, neural interface crown gleaming on her head. Behind her, James O'Neill monitored a bank of quantum computers. "We're ready for the first large-scale test, General." The main screen showed a pack of shadow leapers in a controlled environment in Argentina. Sarah closed her eyes, the neural interface humming to life. The quantum computers chirped and whirred, translating human neural patterns into something the engineered creatures could understand. The shadow leapers moved as one, performing a complex series of maneuvers that exactly matched Sarah's mental commands. The room erupted in applause, but General Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. "Show me the most dangerous one," she ordered. Sarah nodded to James, who switched the feed to a massive containment facility in the Sahara. Inside, a Titan-class bioweapon, a mountain of engineered muscle and armor that had destroyed half of Cairo before being lured into a trap, stood motionless. "Establishing connection," James announced, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Quantum sync in 3, 2, 1. Sarah's face tightened in concentration. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Titan moved, not with its usual devastating fury, but with precise, controlled movements. It raised one massive limb, then another, following an intricate pattern that proved beyond any doubt it was under human control. "My God," General Rodriguez whispered. "You really did it." "We all did it," Sarah corrected, removing the neural interface. Every research team on Earth contributed to this breakthrough. The Japanese quantum consciousness theory, Russian electromagnetic manipulation, Indian protein synthesis. She paused, smiling. Even the Australian suggestion, Admiral Vectora's crystalline exoskeleton, pulsed with anxiety as she stared at the emergency reports flooding her command center. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Impossible," she muttered, watching live feeds from Earth. The Nexus strains were behaving erratically across all deployment zones, not just resisting control, but displaying entirely new behaviors. "Show me the quantum lock status." Her subordinate brought up the data, crystals clicking nervously. "The locks are intact, Admiral. But the creatures are evolving far beyond projected parameters." On the main screen, a Titan-class specimen wasn't rampaging as designed. Instead, it was carefully constructing something, its massive limbs moving with impossible precision. Around it, smaller specimens worked in coordinated patterns that suggested not just intelligence, but purpose. "Send the termination signal," Vectora ordered. "Already tried, Admiral." They're ignoring it. In the ALPS facility on Earth, Sarah Chen and her international team watched their plan unfold. The quantum neural network they created now connected every converted specimen on the planet. Each creature was not just under human control, but had been enhanced with new capabilities that merged human ingenuity with alien biotechnology. "Launch sequence initiating," James announced, monitoring the massive quantum computers that powered their control system. "First wave ready for deployment." General Rodriguez stood at the command station, coordinating with military forces worldwide. "All launch sites report ready. Dr. Chen, this is your show now." Sarah nodded, donning the advanced neural interface crown that would let her coordinate the entire operation. Around the world, modified creatures were being loaded into repurposed alien drop pods. The Zarkax had left plenty of them scattered across Earth, never imagining humans would find a way to use them. Neural sync established, Sarah announced. Beginning launch sequence. Across the planet, pods screamed into the sky. But these weren't the simple delivery vehicles the Zarkax had sent. Human engineers had modified them, incorporating technology reverse engineered from the creatures themselves. Each pod now contained not just biological weapons, but the sum total of humanity's desperate innovation. In orbit, Vectora's sensors detected the launches. Her first reaction was dismissal. Human rockets posed no threat to Zarkax ships. Then the pods began to change. The genetic adaptability that made the Nexus strains such effective weapons had been turned against their creators. The pods themselves were partly organic, and as they approached the Zarkax fleet, they evolved. Armor plates shifted and grew. Stealth systems adapted in real time to enemy scans. By the first crystal, Vectora whispered as the pods breached her fleet's defenses with ease. What have they done? The pods didn't strike the ships directly. Instead, they attached themselves to the hulls. And then the real attack began. The modified creatures emerged, but they weren't mindless weapons anymore. They were tools of surgical precision, cutting through Zarkax ships with devastating efficiency. Shadow Leapers phased through supposedly impenetrable shields. Aquatic variants turned ship cooling systems into weapons. Aerial specimens transformed entire decks into uninhabitable zones. And the Titans demonstrated why humanity's modifications had made them even more terrifying than their original design. Status report, General Rodriguez demanded. Quantum network holding steady, James replied. All specimens responding to commands. The Zarkax fleet is in chaos. They can't understand how their own weapons are being used against them. Sarah monitored the neural feeds, directing the assault with the precision of a surgeon. The creatures moved in perfect coordination, exploiting weaknesses in Zarkax ship design that only became apparent when you understood both the biological and technological aspects of their civilization. They're retreating, Rodriguez announced, watching the tactical display. Their entire fleet is falling back. But Sarah wasn't done. As the Zarkax ships fled, the modified creatures released something else. Spores, microscopic packages of quantum-coded DNA that would spread through the Zarkax Empire's biological computer network like a virus. Not to destroy, but to change. Phase 3 initiated, Sarah said quietly. Now we show them what evolution really means. Vectora watched in horror as her mighty fleet retreated from the human system. She had come to deliver extinction to a primitive species. Instead, she had witnessed the birth of something unprecedented, the merger of human consciousness with quantum biology. And it was coming for her empire. The great hall of the Zarkax High Council had changed. Crystalline growths that once formed rigid, hierarchical patterns now flowed in organic curves. The biomechanical thrones had evolved, merging with their occupants in ways that would have been horrifying to their previous owners. But the Zarkax themselves had changed too. Supreme Commander Ixthor, his exoskeleton now a flowing matrix of crystal and quantum-engineered tissue, faced the human delegation. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at its head, her neural interface crown now a permanent part of her, grown into an elegant circlet that merged seamlessly with her nervous system. 3 cycles ago, Ixthor began, his voice resonating through both air and quantum fields. We thought we were coming to conquer a primitive species. Instead, you showed us what true evolution means. Sarah nodded, feeling the quantum network that now connected all modified life forms throughout both Earth and the Zarkax Empire. The spores they had released had done more than just infect the Empire's biological computer systems. They had initiated a transformation that neither species had fully anticipated. We didn't just reverse engineer your weapons, Sarah explained. We understood them. And in understanding them, we saw a potential you had missed. Life itself could be more than either of our species had imagined. Around them, The modified creatures that had once been weapons now served as living interfaces between the two civilizations. Shadow leapers phased between quantum states, carrying information across vast distances instantly. Titans had become living architecture, growing and adapting structures in real time. The aquatic variants had transformed entire oceans into vast biological computers. The quantum genetic revolution has spread beyond our control, General Rodriguez added. She too had adapted. Her military implants evolved into something that merged human strategic thinking with Zarkak's crystalline computing. Every world touched by the spores is changing, growing, becoming something new. You could have destroyed us, Ixthor observed. When your modified creatures breached our defenses, when your quantum virus spread through our networks, you could have ended the Zarkak's empire forever. That was never our goal, Sarah replied. Humanity has learned through bitter experience that survival doesn't mean the elimination of the other. It means adaptation, evolution, finding ways to become better together. Dr. Carell, the former head of Zarkak's genetics who had helped create the original weapons, stepped forward. His form had changed perhaps the most dramatically, becoming a living synthesis of both species' genetic engineering capabilities. What these humans showed us, he said, is that we had reached the limits of our understanding. We thought quantum genetics was about control, about creating perfect weapons. They showed us it was about possibility, about unlocking the next stage of universal evolution. The quantum network hummed with activity as news spread throughout both civilizations. The formal peace treaty wasn't just an end to hostilities. It was the beginning of something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. Two species, forced into conflict, had instead achieved synthesis. There will be those who resist the change, Rodriguez warned, both human and Zarkaks. They will adapt, or they will be left behind, Ixthor replied. The path of evolution brooks no opposition. Sarah touched the living crystal that had once been her neural interface crown. Through it, she could feel the quantum consciousness that now spanned two civilizations and was spreading further every day. The Zarkaks had intended to prove their superiority through conquest. Instead, they had initiated a transformation that was redefining what it meant to be alive. We are no longer purely human, she said, just as you are no longer purely Zarkaks. We have become something else, something more. And the galaxy will never be the same, Ixthor agreed. Outside the Great Hall, on thousands of worlds, the revolution continued. Quantum-engineered life evolved and adapted, merging with existing ecosystems in ways that enhanced rather than destroyed. The weapons of war had become the tools of creation. The Zarkaks had come to Earth expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they had found catalysts for their own evolution. Humanity had taken their greatest weapons and turned them into the keys to unlock the next chapter in the story of life itself. It wasn't victory through destruction, but through transformation. Not the end of a war, but the beginning of an entirely new form of existence. The monsters they had unleashed had indeed awakened something, not the terror they had intended, but a power that would reshape the very meaning of life in the galaxy. And it was only the beginning.